Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Non-Clinical Collective. My name's Mike Asbach, and I am so happy to have a guest today. We're going to have a great conversation, and I'd love to introduce you all to Hope Cook. And Hope, I generally, as a rule of thumb, don't like giving intros or bios because I'm going to screw half of it up. So, Hope, I'd love to just kick it over to you. And if you want to give a bit of an introduction of who you are, what your passions are, and then we'll kick off a great conversation.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. So I've been a PA for 22 years, and I thought this was my life. My career was going to be the thing that I did from the moment I graduated until I retired. And then I hit an episode of burnout, probably, I don't know, 10, 14 years ago. And I blamed that on the practice. It was everybody else's fault. It was the doctors, the medical assistants, the toxic environment, and I switched to a different office, and everything on paper was perfect. And I thought, all right, this is it. I was right. It was them, not me. And then I hit another wall of burnout. And this was right around the pandemic. So I took a furlough of probably 5 months and really discovered who I'd lost in the course of becoming a PA and sort of, making my career define me. And I realized there's so many more parts of me. There's a writer, there's a podcaster, there's a creative, there's a mom in there. And so my creativity just exploded. And I took a coaching course for 9 months and then went on to take a master life coaching course and realized that my passion was in coaching other healthcare professionals around burnout. And I recently wrote a book on healing clinician burnout. So that's been a lot of fun. I still practice 2 days a week in dermatology here in Georgia. And the other days I do my podcast, I write, and I coach healthcare clinicians.
That's awesome. And yeah, I'm such a big believer in identity diversity. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I think last year I had 19 or 20 sources of income, and it really does help burnout because there's no single thing in my career portfolio that is so important that it causes me to lose sleep at night. And I really love that about my career. Talk to me a little bit about the book. I'd love to hear more about that. I know you just recently published it, and I'm sure I'd love to use an opportunity just to give a bit of an overview of the book for our listeners.
Yeah. So when I took my furlough, and then I went back to work. I went through a period of about 6 months where I thought, I can't keep doing this. We had actually met with a financial planner, and it was supposed to be a routine meeting. And he made a casual comment about, Hope, you're set as long as you keep doing this for another 20 years. And I was like, what? It just had never occurred to me that I didn't like what I was doing and didn't want to keep doing it the way I was doing it for another 2 decades. And it just hit me. And I was like, I don't want to keep doing this. So around that time, that's when I signed up for life coaching, and I was ready to leave medicine. But the tools that I learned just shifted my whole perspective. And so the seed was sort of planted in me to share this with other people. And I found that through my coaching, I was sharing the same things over and over, the same tools, the same ahas, the same, sort of pathway. And so I mapped out a framework. I called it CPR because we all know CPR is used in healthcare to breathe life back into people. And so the CPR framework walks clinicians from, oh my gosh, I'm drowning. How do I keep doing this? To, okay, I actually like what I'm doing. I want to keep doing this. And whether that's clinical or non clinical.
Yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on the non-clinical space because it sounds like you and I are both somewhat there. We both retain some clinical presence, but we've also found, I think, a lot of joy and opportunity to combat burnout through diversity. So, what do you think is the biggest barrier for maybe burned out clinicians that don't want to be in clinic grinding it out day in and day out?
I think one of the barriers is our lack of confidence in ourselves that we can do things outside the clinic, because for 2 years we are just trained and almost brainwashed like, you are a clinician, this is your life, you will do this forever. And so it's so hard to imagine ourselves doing anything else, entrepreneurship or just anything. So that's part of it. And then I think permission. We don't give ourselves permission to dream, to scheme, to be open to possibilities we hadn't considered, to fail if we try something and it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I completely agree that the stat I always like to use is in the legal profession, it's something like 2 or 3% of all people that go to law school will become trial attorneys. So if you go to law school, the vast majority of them will never set foot in a courtroom to argue a case. And yet we think about the legal profession as suits. We're going to go and do battle in the courtroom and argue with judges and opposing counsel. And that's just not the case. And yet, for some reason in medicine, we have this very rigid view that if we go to school to become a physician, a PA, an NP, that working clinically is the only option. And it
Hmm.
really does, it makes me frustrated because I think our skill set is so valuable in many different fields. It doesn't have to be clinic.
It is. And I see the newer generation really shifting their mindset around it. I was going to give a talk to the California Dermatology PA Society, and I was going to call it How to Stay Married to Medicine, Prevent Burnout, blah, blah, blah. And the lady organizing the talk said, I know that today's PA students and new graduates are going to understand what you mean, married to medicine. And it was true. I talked to a lot of them and they were like, "What do you mean? Like, if it doesn't work out, then I'm going to shift and do something else." But I didn't feel that way. 20 years ago, it was like, this is do or die.
Yeah, I think we're part of the Grey's Anatomy generation that grew up watching shows like Grey's
Yeah.
Anatomy, put up on a pedestal the idea that we give everything to the hospital, including family, whatever. Obviously, Grey's Anatomy, every season someone dies in the hospital. Yet the Gen Z and younger, it's a shift, and I'm so appreciative of it. Even within my clinic, we've got a lot of people that are 26 and younger,
Yeah. And
and certainly
we,
it's different, but it's good.
and you're right. We can do so many other things. On my podcast, I interview people who are doing work in AI, people who are doing, and I interviewed somebody who started a business making biscuits. It's things that you wouldn't even
Well,
consider in PA school.
so let me reframe it back to burnout. So if we have people listening to this and they feel unhappy with their job, or maybe their career is not exactly what they thought it would be, what are some signs and symptoms that might be indicative that this is not just a phase? This is not just the job as you described in your own experience. How can we help people understand that this might be career burnout that requires maybe a deeper level of concern or deeper level of consideration for next steps?
Yeah, I love that question. I'd say the number one symptom is dread. If you have that dread on Sunday nights, Monday morning, you pull into the parking lot, that is your nervous system telling you something is not right. This is not working. It may not be that you need to quit your job, but it's a wake up call that something needs to shift. You just feel exhausted. You don't find joy in the parts of your job that you used to find joy in. And you may find that your emotions are all over the place. You're taking it out on your family members. And so rather than say, this is a sign I need to quit, this is a sign I'm not cut out for this, I'm not tough enough, it really is a wake up call. Your life is speaking to you and saying, hey, something about this is not right. You need to take a look at what's going on. And that's what the C in the CPR is about. It's cocooning, it's doing the inner work to ask yourself, like, what's working? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? I just sort of stuffed my emotions for the longest time. And during the pandemic, I think I was able to explore, like, how do I really feel about caring for patients all day, every day? And people can find that release and that exploration through working with a therapist, a mentor. For me, it was writing. That was part of it, was just sort of exploring, like, who am I and what do I really want?
So if we identify burnout, so we're
Hmm.
looking into our own careers, we're being introspective, and we recognize that there's something wrong, that there's
Yeah.
some career burnout there. What's the next step? So you mentioned counseling. I think that's great. You mentioned some other pathways to kind of navigate or think through it. But clearly, the answer is not to just go in and quit your job the next day.
Yeah.
So, what would you consider to be a next step if someone has identified burnout and then they're starting to shift from identifying the problem to now trying to build and create a roadmap to find a solution?
Yeah, so some of the first tools I talk about in my book they're so seemingly simple, but they're so powerful. One of them is just feel/need. What do I feel? What do I need? And when we're kids, our parents, if we're lucky, they take care of our needs. But as adults, we don't stop and ask ourselves, like, what do I need? So that's one of them. Identifying 3 things every day that filled you up. Like, what do you like about your career? What do you need more of in your life? What's draining your battery? Who's draining your battery? battery. So the first stage is going through those questions and sort of sitting back and becoming an observer of your life. And then the next step is where your nervous system is calmed down enough for you to start dreaming and exploring possibilities. And I encourage people to do that first through non career avenues. So instead of saying, okay, I need to be an MSL, I need to like escape from clinical medicine and do this. Instead, I have them explore like who they are. What hobbies do you like? What lights you up? Do you like nature? Do you need more of that? And that sort of cracks open this window of possibility like, hey, I am somebody other than Hope the PA. I'm somebody other than a person who takes care of people. And then when they start doing that, they'll find that their brain starts seeing possibility everywhere. They start meeting people, they start talking to people they may not have talked to before. And this is the dreaming and scheming stage, or the P stage, the planning and preparing. But you can't do this initially. When you're super burned out, your nervous system is in that fight or flight mode, and it won't allow you to imagine the future. You just can't fathom, like, how could I one day be happy when it feels like I'm dying inside? So you get to the planning and preparation stage, and that's really where you start mapping out, how do I want this to look? How do I want to feel when I wake up in the mornings? How do I want to feel when I get out of my car? How do I want to feel when I'm coming home from work? And that's a tool I call follow the feeling. So first you identify how you want to feel, and then you slowly put the puzzle pieces in to figure out what gives me that feeling. Even if it's not work, what gives me that feeling? And then the work piece will come into play after your nervous system is calmed down and after you've started meeting some of those other needs.
Yeah, I think two things within that really resonated with me. And one is that we need to make sure that when we're feeling burned out, we don't just immediately assume that it's all the job and that if we leave the job, everything will be better. I think it's so true. I work in psychiatry. I don't know if we even started there. So I talk about mental health, I talk about burnout all the time. And there's so many times in life where I think we are overrepresented in just one aspect. And a lot of times that's career, certainly in medicine, but even outside of that, maybe you have someone that their only identity is mom. They're a stay-at-home mother, and they don't they don't really see anyone other than their kids whining and crying and needing care. And that can be really hard because their only identity at that stage of life might be their role as a mother. And I think identity diversity is such a big part of this. I always think about in my life, I want to make sure that I'm surrounded by people that don't care at all how many scripts I have to send, that don't care if I have notes that are unlocked, because a lot of the people that I have as friends and people that we do life with together in church and other social circles, I don't think any of them could even competently tell you what I do for a living. Most of them think I'm a therapist or some sort of thing like that. And I think that's good. I love that. I don't necessarily want to have a ton of overlap between those areas because it gives me different identities. But the other thing that resonated that you said is making a plan. And it's a great opportunity. I love the idea of dreaming and not necessarily saying, oh, well, that would never work. I could never make biscuits and start a business doing that, but rather just thinking about the things that really drive passion. We don't always have an opportunity to have passion and career oversect. Sometimes we need a job that just pays the bills. And healthcare can certainly offer that. It's a well-paid field. We can find jobs where we clock in, clock out. But I love the idea of finding an opportunity or finding space to really sit down and kind of dream and think about what would be the ultimate. Because if you're going to make a big change, you don't want to necessarily make this big drastic change in life to then go to another job that is only incrementally better.
Yeah, burnout will follow you. It's a shadow.
For
It will
sure.
follow
Yeah.
you if you don't identify what's causing it. I took yoga teacher training like in 2019, and I did not plan on being a career yoga teacher. It, paid $20 an hour, but it opened me up. It helped me explore who I am. And it gave me the ability to just breathe and sort of explore my life from a vantage point that wasn't in the exam room. I have a slideshow that I give to clinicians, and there's one slide of Tom Cruise in that movie where he said, "You complete me." Jerry Maguire.
Yes,
Or
yes.
he didn't say that. Sorry, his female counterpart said that, "You complete me." And it was like, wait a minute. I was relying on my job to complete me. And then at another stage in my life, I was relying on my husband to complete me or my kids to complete me. And so one of my big ahas was, wait, I have to meet my needs first. I have to be there for myself and give myself permission to live this one wild and precious life because nobody else is going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just read Let Them by Mel Robbins. So much
Yeah.
of that is resonating. It was a great book. So we've identified burnout as we're taking maybe listeners through the journey. We've now done the introspection. We've self-reflected on maybe the causes or the contributions. We've now dreamed. We've dreamed about what an ideal career would look like or what that next step should be. What are your thoughts or maybe some practical recommendations for someone that has now formulated this really high and lofty dream of what an ideal career could be? And maybe it's a very atypical career path, one that is somewhat uncharted. What would be some first practical steps? And obviously, I'm trying to keep this broad,
Yeah.
but are there things that people can do to start implementing that plan? Because I think so often, even I think about exercise. If we told someone to get off the couch and run a marathon, they would not have success. But if we tell someone to get off the couch and start running 10 minutes a day and build incrementally, then they can hopefully get there. So, how can we create a plan for people to slowly and incrementally build towards that dream goal if they've identified some lofty career aspiration?
Yeah, so in the startup world, you hear the term reverse engineering, and it's the same thing with medicine. So you have an end goal in sight. And again, you may not have specifics, but you kind of know how you want to feel. What's not working? What would I rather have? And then you reverse engineer. And just like a maze that's on the back of like a kid's menu at a restaurant, you're going to take these little tiny incremental steps. So steps, I call them turtle steps. 30 minutes or less, ridiculously easy, steps that don't activate your nervous system again. So you may have a list of 20 items. When I decided to leave my first job, I had a non-compete. So that was a huge barrier. So I had to identify tiny little steps. Okay, first step, I need to like find a lawyer. So maybe on day one, I post on my little, town PA group. Does anybody know of an employment lawyer? Maybe I make the phone call the next day. Maybe I make the appointment, so you don't overwhelm your nervous system by writing out a to do list that includes like redo resume or call MSLs or something like that. So you break it down into these tiny little turtle steps, and you also identify what barriers come up in my brain. I call them the buts. So you'll have all these limiting beliefs that pop up. I can't leave my patients. This doctor trained me. I can't leave her. I can't make less than $150,000 a year. All these, I can't go without health insurance. So you identify those. And a lot of my work is helping people question those beliefs. And, how does it make you feel when you believe that? If you continue to believe that, what is it going to cost you? So it's still a lot of that inner work, but practically speaking, I help them map out, all right, what do you want? Let's break it down into steps. Who do you know who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody? Could you reach out to that person? And then the buts pop up again, but I don't have experience doing that, but they'll think I'm an idiot. And so we work through all that and just reverse engineer until you find yourself at the point where you want to be.
I love that. I think it's such great advice and it's practical to any plan. Certainly, we're talking about this from a career standpoint, but that can even be applicable to general life. If you're looking to make changes in your personal life or within relationships, I think a lot of that is certainly applicable. So, last question I have for you, Hope. I like to think about passion versus excellence. And I know there's a lot of debate. Should we pursue careers that we're passionate about, or should we pursue careers where maybe we are really, really highly proficient in that task? I'm of the belief that if you find something that you're really good at, that passion will follow, because I think the pursuit of excellence will naturally lead to passion about that topic. But I'd love your thoughts on passion versus excellence in terms of burnout, but then also just in terms of career mapping or projecting out.
Yeah, so I'm big on using your body as a compass or a GPS unit. And I have a tool that's related to this. But you know how if you ask somebody, like, what does your gut tell you? They can almost always give you, like, if they don't stop and think about it, they can give you an answer. So to me, that is passion. That's sort of taking away the cultural shoulds, the cultural norms, like, I ought to do this. And instead, you're really tapping into that inner wisdom, that inner wise person that says, hey, this is what you're here for. This is what lights you up. So to me, that's passion. After working in medicine for this long, I do feel like I've reached a point where I could almost do it with my eyes closed. And so I may be excellent at something, but if I'm missing that passion, if my body says, I just don't want to do this anymore, then that excellence sort of falls flat. I may know exactly what I'm doing and prescribing and diagnosing, but if I don't have that passion, then it's just like living life without the light on.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So, Hope, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know we're running up. We always want to try and have these be about 20 to 30 minutes. So, we're trying to be respectful of time. I'd love to leave it with you. If you have any final thoughts, maybe kick it back to the book, even because I know I'm really excited to share the book with listeners, and I hope listeners will go check it out. But any final thoughts? And then where can we find the book? Where can listeners find you if they wanted to dig deeper into this?
Yeah, thank you. All right, so y'all, if you are feeling that dread, if you are feeling that sense of, I don't know if I can keep doing this, whatever this is, whether it's a relationship or your job or your side things that you're doing, this is a sign. This is your life speaking to you. It's a wake up call. So don't sit there and just have your head down and go through the next 30 years doing what you're doing because it's a sign that this isn't working. So reach out to somebody. I have the book. You can work through the tools yourself. It's called Healing Clinician Burnout: How to Revive Your Life and Career. It's on Amazon. You can go to my website, coachhopecook.com. And I do group coaching. I also have a podcast called Healthcare Clinician Burnout. So I interview guests, and I'd love to have you on, Mike, and see what your journey has been like. But yeah, y'all use it as a wake up call. Your life speaking to you. Listen.
Yes, absolutely. If you're feeling something, there's probably a reason, and you can listen to that instinct.
Yeah.
Well, Hope, thank you so much for joining today. It was really great to talk to you. And as you can tell, I think we're both so passionate about this topic. And I love healthcare and I love medicine. And I think anything that we can do to help people find their path, because the pre-prescribed path that we learn about in school doesn't always have to be the one. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, whether it's teaching, medical writing, where you can really make a big difference in this industry. You can make a big difference for patients, but also do it in a way that gives you the gratification, the feeling of belonging, the joy, the passion that you deserve in your career. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this topic. Quick plug for us: Hope is also a member of the Non-Clinical Collective. So if you'd like to interact with Hope, if you'd like to learn more about burnout, please check out our private group, the Non-Clinical Collective. It is completely free for healthcare to join. Our hope with it is to be a single source of access for non-clinical careers and burnout support. So I hope you check it out. Hope, have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Non-Clinical Collective podcast.
Thanks, Mike.